Charlotte Fisher, hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. Thank you for joining me. For everyone who's listening to me now, they know that one of my favourite things to talk about is nutrition. But I almost feel out of my depth because I'm normally used to talking about nutrition to people being the educator. So to have someone on who is actually a nutritionist and a nutrition tutor, I almost feel like a fan. I'm almost like fanboying because
You.
yeah, I love it. I love it. So, so just tell me a little bit about yourself, Charlotte.
Um, so I have a little bit of my background in nutrition. I have an undergraduate degree in nutritional science. I did that in Manchester, and a master's degree in sports nutrition, which I did at Loughborough University. Which anyone who knows the UK will know that if you want to do sport, Loughborough is the place to do it. And yeah, I'm a performance and lifestyle nutritionist, nutrition lecturer / tutor, and I'm also an author. Random things about my about my background. I'm a former national level diver, so I did like platform and springboard diving
Oh, wow.
back when I was younger, and I'm also a qualified pastry chef, and I worked as a pastry chef for a few years through my degree. So that paid my way through uni, and also
Brilliant.
basically paid for my master's degree. So that was cool.
So the master's degree is in nutrition, right?
Yeah, yeah. Both of them
And,
are in nutrition. My
and
undergraduate's nutrition as well. My master's is sports nutrition, so specifically performance. Both of them were difficult. Both of them took a lot of. So I think with degrees, you get out as much as you put in. Um,
yeah,
and I put a lot into them. While I was doing my undergraduate, I basically just volunteered for everything possible. So I worked with Lancashire Thunder women's cricket. I worked with England touch rugby. Just volunteered to help as many people as possible. And I also did a couple of bodybuilding shows during my undergrad, so I added that on as like a stressor, basically. Um, but you get those students that don't go to lectures and that don't contribute. Like I was the person that went to everything and was everywhere and went to all my tutorials and stuff like that. So, and it got to the point where, so I used to get really frustrated in lectures because I'd just be sat there like, how have people not already done the prior reading and how do people not know the answer to this already? And like the lecturer would sit and or like stand and ask a question, and I'd be the only one that was like, I know the answer to this. And eventually, my lecturer was like, Charlotte, will you stop contributing to the lectures? And I got really annoyed because I was like, well, no one else has done the prior reading, have they? And everyone
you
else was just like, yeah, that I used to get really annoyed because people wouldn't contribute to lectures, and I was the only one that did. And then I got told off for contributing to lectures. So, yeah,
brilliant.
I didn't
There's
get
wor-
particularly well with that lecturer.
No, I mean, there's worse things to be told off for. I think I would find that quite frustrating as well, especially if I'm so passionate about, what it is I'm studying. And,
Hmm.
as you know, university is not cheap.
It's,
So, when you're putting in all that effort and that money into something
yeah.
and, you are giving it 100%. And then, of course, everyone else, like, you get frustrated. Like, why are you not, why are you wasting this opportunity?
Oh, so
Um,
much. So I was working as well. So I was working like 45 to 60 hours a week around my nutrition degree to keep me going. So actually, I managed to save quite a lot of money, but yeah, that's by the by. But like other people I didn't get help from my parents, and I had the minimum maintenance loan because my parents have like a decent income. Um, so I just didn't particularly get that much financial help, so I had to do it all myself. So I think that's why I felt it more.
And how did it feel like? Obviously, I've been a chef, so not like anything Michelin star, but I have been in kitchens for quite a few years, so I
Yeah.
do feel your pain. Is I can relate there, and I used the same thing where I took a lot of the stuff I learned through chefing into that became my passion for nutrition, and then
Hmm.
eventually into fitness.
Yeah.
But pastry chef, so I struggled to see the healthiest stuff within a pastry kitchen. So how hard was that to be, obviously being around the sweet treats, for and making them for people, and then also knowing about the nutrition side of things? Like, did you find that quite difficult at all?
Not really, actually. So before I went to do my nutrition degree, I didn't really know what I wanted to do because they kind of expect you to decide your entire future when you're like 15. Um,
Yeah,
and you're picking your degrees, and your degrees picking your A level subjects. And I didn't pick the right subjects to go do medicine. So I was like, well, that's kind of screws that plan up. And I don't really want to do a foundation year, which in hindsight,
yeah,
like, would have been a great thing to do. And it's not really that
yeah,
long. But when you're like 17, the idea of doing like 6 years at university and 2 years as a junior doctor. It feels like a really long time. Didn't go
It's a
do
very
that.
long time.
Yeah, didn't do that. And I was like, well, I don't really know what I want to do. And my head of sixth form was like, well, you're going to go to university. I was like, I don't know if I am, Pam. And she was like, no, like, don't waste this, because I was in the Oxford Cambridge group, like the students that they were trying to push towards Oxford and Cambridge. But I just didn't really want to. Yeah. I didn't really want to go. So I took a year out and I went to college and I baked. And I'm one of those people that if you tell me that I shouldn't do something, I'll be like, watch me. So my head of sixth form was like, that's not a viable career. So I just went, I was like, well, stuff you, Pam. I'm off to college. And had a great time. I had a great time baking for a year. And then as part of that bakery and patisserie course, we did a lot of food science. And I was like, oh, I really like this food science stuff. But then I was also really into like the health and fitness stuff. Obviously, I've been involved in sport for my entire life as well. So it all just kind of naturally fell together. And I was like, nutrition. And that was it. And I basically applied to my nutrition degree with like a month before the start of the course, maybe 2 months before the start of the course. Like, it didn't go through any of the normal channels whatsoever. You know how you apply through UCAS? I literally just rang the head of the course at Manchester and was like, hi, can I have a place? And she was like, yeah. I was like, oh, that was easy, because UCAS is so stressful. But anyway, back to pastry chefing.
Yes.
So yes, I pastry chefed, and I actually found that I had a really, really good relationship with food because I was surrounded by it all day. So it didn't stress me out, if that makes sense. I think it was just completely almost like being desensitized to it. So I was surrounded by pudding every day, and I ate so much pudding, and but I was also like, wasn't bothered about it. So I think loads of people have said to me, they're like, oh, I couldn't be surrounded by chocolate all day. I'd just end up eating all of it. I was like, no, that's you can't do that because it's for other people. And you do just sort of desensitize to it. And I think it's when people start going, oh, no, I won't go anywhere near the dessert, that then they start obsessing about it so much. And I had the opposite of restriction. I had so much of it around me. I just didn't care about it anymore. And yeah, being a nutritionist, it did kind of play into my mind. It was like, oh, I'm feeding these people things that aren't particularly nutritious. But then nutrition isn't necessarily about eating as few calories as possible. It's also about enjoyment and like the social side around food and eating food that tastes nice and dessert tastes nice. So I really enjoyed it.
I mean, I'd say this on so many of my videos, but like I try and base my entire service over the last few years around one word, and that is balance. Right? And I'm glad you said that, because this is something that I've really hammered down to like my clients and my audience so much. It's like, I've got chocolate in the cupboard. Oh, eat it. But is that allowed? Well, yeah, there's got to be some form of balance there. And I agree with what you said before. I wasn't just in pastry, but I worked with all sort, dead creamy stuff, and
when you're making a holiday, you're like, oh, I know exactly what goes into this.
Yeah, salads and stuff. It was pretty deep, quite high in fat stuff. And at the time, I remember, it's like you used the term before, desensitized, and you really do. Like I'd just been making stuff, and people would say to me, "Oh, but you're surrounded by food all day. How do you manage to maintain your weight if you work? Because I wasn't a personal trainer at the time."
Anything.
Yeah, I'm like, chef, don't eat. You have to taste test stuff. Yeah. That's where my calories are coming from. I'm testing stuff before I put it on the plates, and making sure that it's all good. So completely understand what you mean with that and the desensitizing. But I find that my experience in the kitchen did evolve for me to then think, hang on, I really, not only do I enjoy making stuff, but I'm actually really fascinated about foods and what they contain and what they should go with in combination. And that eventually led to me studying further about the nutrition.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move on to your book, Charlotte, because you have a book.
I do.
And it is called The Fat Loss Handbook.
It is, yes.
So talk me through that. Like, is it exactly what it says on the tin?
Essentially, yeah. So I left my full-time job at the end of February this year, moved home, and I think it was literally about 2 weeks later, lockdown kicked in, and it was like, well, I guess I'm
Oh
self-employed
wow.
now.
Yeah.
So I'm really lucky that my parents own a garden centre, and while they were closed in the first lockdown, we were still able to home deliver. So I went and kind of worked most of the time for them, and also was setting up my business on the side and in the evenings. And I worked some really, really ridiculously long days. And I'd years ago, not years ago, but yeah, maybe it was years ago, before I started working at my old job, which shall not be named because we don't like it.
Yeah.
I basically started writing, and I just wrote so much, and I ended up with like a billion different Word documents that were all like very similar but had different things in them, and they were like, and then I'd started writing again, and I'd done a lot as well when I lived in Loughborough. So when I first started my full-time job with this company, I started as an intern, which meant I didn't get paid very much. I think I got paid something like £700 a month to work full time. And because of that, I
Wow.
couldn't afford internet and rent. It was like, would you like to live in this flat, or would you like to have Wi-Fi?
To browse,
And it was like,
yeah. Would you like to browse Google or have a
I'll
roof
have a
over your
roof over
head?
your head. And I was like, well, I can browse Google in Tesco if I need to, like, which is around the corner. So I don't need Wi-Fi. So I basically lived without internet for a year, and it was the best thing I've ever done because I started writing, and I started creating, and I started doing really productive things. So this is kind of where the book was born, is that I just write articles about nutrition that I never intended to publish. It was just for me, and it was just to consolidate my own knowledge. So I basically shoved all of these articles that I had into a Word document, and then started filtering it and editing it. And that's kind of where the Fat Loss Handbook was born. So it's all about, again, that word balance. And it's all about
Yeah.
creating sustainable lifestyle habits. It's not about, it is split into 10 weeks of nutrition education, and then there's like little tasks and reflection stuff to do, and it's all about building this sort of like bulletproof nutrition habits lifestyle type thing. And
Yeah.
it's improving your yeah, it's like it's a coaching program to teach you how to lose body fat and keep it off without extremes or restriction. And it takes you through the A to Z of setting up your diet for fat loss success. And I basically wrote
Yeah.
it the way that I'd want someone to coach me through fat loss. And it's how I coach my clients through fat loss.
And that's a good fit. That's a good way to look at it as well, because how many coaches, whether it be in fitness or nutrition, where that will teach stuff either by the book, the way they want it to be taught, but they wouldn't necessarily like themselves to be taught that way. So I like the idea of, it's everything that I'd like to be taught. I'm now teaching my clients the same, and I don't think there's enough of that. I think there's too many coaches that are just teaching by the
Yeah.
book, but they wouldn't necessarily take that kind of teaching or coaching themselves. And I tend to feel like you're going to coach much better if you are coaching the way that you would like to be
It
coached.
helps if you can empathize with the people going through it as well, because this is the way that I have, I suppose, coached myself in the past. So I understand the thought processes. I understand. I find it interesting sometimes when clients or tell me something, and I'm like, oh, is your brain doing this at the moment? And they're like, yeah, that's exactly the thoughts that went through my mind. And I'm like,
Yeah.
been there, done that. Let's work
Yeah.
through it. But it does help to be able to empathize, and that's a really good skill to have as a coach, is empathy.
We are in a very exceptional
Mm-hmm.
year. So how do you think, I'm still trying to get my head around it
Yeah.
myself. And as are the clients that I work with, and as are probably majority of people that are listening to this, but this is an exceptional time. Normally you get to this time of the year anyway, people's dieting habits may start to change. Normally as we approach
Mm-hmm.
Christmas, people have Christmas parties, but obviously none of everything is changed
Yeah.
this year. So it's really hard. It's like nothing we've seen before in terms of people's habits. Like some people are, really focusing because they haven't got, Christmas parties and stuff. So they're really on they're using this time
Mm-hmm.
now, better nutrition during the first lockdown, and that's carried on for the year. But then there's a lot of people now that are like, I don't even know where to start. Gyms are closed. What's even the point? So what do you find right now with the pandemic in terms of where people are with the diets and stuff and how they perceive nutrition? Do you feel like lockdown is having that kind of effect? And what advice would you give to people that are sort of quite confused with their nutrition right now?
So this is one of those scenarios that I find really interesting because none of it really applies to me because I'm not a particularly like everyone's like, oh no, lockdown. I'm like, oh no, this is horrible. I have to stay at home and stuff and I can't be sociable. Oh no. So for me it's like it's really weird because I'm not in that boat at all. I'm having a great time in lockdown. It's all about it's all about adapting and you have to be adaptable and people get so caught up in like well this is what I've always done now I can't do it so it's all ruined and it's like no you can still do things it just means that you have to adapt and do it a little bit differently but it will be fine. I think now's a great time to work on your nutrition and I'm not just saying that because like I have a book that I would like to sell to people. I genuinely think it's an amazing time to start because you're at home. So you're not really going out to restaurants. You can't go out to eat. You're cooking all your food at home. So now's a great time to learn how to cook for yourself, how to cook nutritious food, how to feed yourself well. And it's such a stable time. Like it's very unstable in that it's very different to what we're used to. But also you have such a stable routine and you can develop this stable routine because you're not particularly leaving and you're not really doing anything different day to day. So it gives you time to just nail down these habits. You're not going away, you're not going out drinking, you're not going out partying. It gives you a chance to work out, to get that like baseline in place almost. So to change your baseline to something that is more like you'd like it to be and more kind of conducive to that fat loss that you want to happen. So great time to get those foundation habits in place, even if it's just stuff like changing up your lunch to make it a little bit more nutritious and a little bit less energy dense. It's a good time to start doing that because you have like supermarkets are still open, you can still get food, and then you can make it at home and you can play about and be like, oh, actually, I didn't find that particularly satisfying. I'll try something different tomorrow. So it is a good time to experiment.
That's a great way of looking at it, and I think people should be. I almost feel like I want to shout to the world, don't waste this. I know it seems really strange because obviously, what's going on in the world isn't necessarily a positive situation, but I say to a lot of people, it will be over.
Yeah.
And I said this at the end of the first lockdown because obviously that was a longer time for people than it is now. And a lot of people were discovering things. They were like getting, making meals that they'd never had before. I was personally like expanding my palate a little bit more, and trying different things. So, but I think as we've come to this time round, I know a lot of people are fed up, but I think you're so right. Baseline is what a word, because it's like I did a live video not that long ago last week. And I was talking about morning routines and using this time now. I think a lot of people are going back and forth, waiting for this to all be over. And I almost want to turn it around and go, yeah, but look, you can use this time to completely reset your habits and embed new habits now so that when life does start to open back up, they'll stay with you. And that'll lead to, healthier changes down the road. And it's the same as what we have every year. I say the same thing, on my pages every year when we get to this time of year, and I always call it Operation Damage Control. There you go. So basically, I always bring on this campaign this time of year where it's like, don't wait for January. Putting lockdown out of the situation. Most people get to Christmas around this time of year, and obviously we know the foods that are coming out. We know the mulled wine comes out, and that's absolutely fine. But so many people are guilty of then going, I'll just start in January. And it's like, no, use this time now, not to lose weight. And I actively tell people to do that. Don't focus on trying to lose weight right now because it's probably not going to be you're probably going to have a miserable Christmas. Don't try too hard for that. What I do say to people is just use this time for damage control. Be mindful of what you're eating. Don't necessarily actively try and diet, but then don't just go, oh, well, I'll leave it till January anyway. So I always tend to bring that campaign on this time of the year every year to sort of say, look, this is all you need to do. Just, don't go into January being a stone heavier, and then you've got more to work off. That normally happens anyway. I normally actively try and promote that. It's like, just use this month as damage control. Just be mindful of what you're doing. Don't just let yourself go and hope that January is going to be your saving grace, because what you can do is head into the gym in January and, you haven't gained anything. And now you're one step ahead of people. Obviously, I own a gym, so I get it all the time. I'm just going to leave it for Christmas and I'll be back in January. That's absolutely fine. But from a health perspective, I probably wouldn't recommend doing that.
I don't see any reason why people can't exercise now. And people go, oh, but the gyms are shut. And it's like, yeah, have you been outside recently? You can leave the house and you can, like Bojo has said, that we can have as much outdoor exercise as you want. Go jogging, get that rusty bike out of the shed, give it to some man who knows how to fix bikes for like 50 quid. And there you've got an exercise tool. You can go outside. Fun fact, I cancelled my gym membership like months before lockdown 2.0 kicked in, because I went back and I was like, this is awful. So I haven't been to the gym for literally months, and I haven't consistently been to the gym for like 2 years now. And I'm doing quite well, so it's fine. And you don't have to go into January a stone heavier. And I never quite understand this. Like, Christmas is one day, maybe 2 days if you extend it out to Boxing Day, maybe like 3 days if you extend it out to like Christmas Eve as well. But I don't see any reason why you have to let everything go over Christmas just because it's Christmas. Like, it's one day. You can exactly. Have a decent meal, then you just go back to normal, or you just eat normally like a normal person. And you don't have to go mental over Christmas. And this is what gets me about people. They're like, oh, no, but it's Christmas, so have some chocolate raisins. I'm like, but I don't want chocolate raisins. I'm like, no, but it's Christmas. That's not very Christmassy. And it's like, no, I just don't want the chocolate raisins. And just, you don't have to eat things just because it's Christmas, I think is what I'm trying to get at.
My wife will come in with mince pies. I'm like, why? I don't want them. We don't normally eat them. Yeah, but it's Christmas.
Replace your normal pudding with more Christmassy puddings, and that's absolutely fine. Yes. But you don't have to have extra just because it's Christmas, especially if you're not hungry. So this is a great time to listen, to learn how to listen to your hunger and fullness signals, because I know that a lot of people ignore those over Christmas and they're like, oh, I'm stuffed, but go on then. And it's like, well, you don't have to if you don't want to, and you probably won't enjoy it as much if you're overeating on purpose just because it's Christmas. So
it's just embedded, isn't it? It's the same as I tell people. It's like, why people will overeat the amount of calories that they need at that time when they're eating meals? And I'm probably guilty of this myself, and it stems from like childhood. So when we were all younger, obviously, like our parents or grandparents said, you're not to leave that table until you finished your plate. Well, that sticks. That sticks. So that I now fast forward now, and the same thing will happen. I'll have, especially with like Sunday dinners, and I'll see it and like, there is absolutely no need for that amount of calories to enter my body.
But I'm going to because it's now on my plate.
But I'm going to, because it's now on my plate, and I'll be damned if I'd leave that plate half, with anything left on it. It's a learned behaviour, and I think that's what we're saying about Christmas. It's like, well, why don't you just replace some of the stuff that you would normally have with the stuff that you want to have at Christmas?
A great tip for those I have to finish my plate people is to use a smaller plate. And it sounds so simple, and it is, but if if it works, it's not a stupid idea, because if you perceive that to be a full plate of food, regardless how big the plate is, and because it's a full plate of food, you perceive it to be filling, so you will probably get as much fullness from that smaller plate of food as you will from that bigger plate of food, simply because the plate is full. But you get obviously less food with the smaller plate. So
yeah, I mean, it's also, as you know, there's a lot of psychology to eating as well, and I think people, it's not just literally. So many people get confused and think that, particularly like what I do, it's like, it's all about telling people to eat chicken and broccoli 6 days a week and go to the gym 6 times a week, and it's like, that's so not what what it is, and it really doesn't have to be that depressing either. It is just about balance. And you were talking before about, obviously, you cancelled gym membership and you started running. Well, not
I've done
started
a lot of
running.
running.
You've done a lot. You've done a lot of running, and you've got your bike out. But talking about the running side, a lot of people have started doing that. I've noticed that, obviously, since lockdown. And as you say, Bojo would say, get out. So people have started going out and running, and that's kind of, people are discovering running for the first time, like, of their entire lives right now. It's mental how many people were out and about during lockdown to get their exercise. It's like, what was you doing before?
I do wonder that.
So everyone suddenly discovered exercise for the first time. So what we want to talk about now is what your suggestions are with nutrition for running. A lot of the time, people will just assume that they want to run because, say, they want to lose weight, but then they're also going to be in a calorie deficit when they're trying to run, and that's obviously not the best idea because people don't understand that they need energy. So what would your suggestion be around running? I know you have a lot of history in that, so if people are starting to do their running right now and they need the right nutrition, what would you suggest?
So just to kind of tell your audience why I'm a decent authority to talk about running, I got into running in about 2011 when I was 14 or 15, and I did a week of work experience with the army. So when you do like your year 10 or 11 work experience or whatever it is, I ended up, my placement fell through at the last minute, and they went, oh, well, we have spaces on the army residential, and I was like, it'll be fun, why not? And it was amazing. And I won all the strength tests, like, I think there was like 20 of us, including like half the rugby team. And I beat them all. I beat them all on the press-ups and sit-ups tests, and to the point where they made me redo them because they thought my partner had like miscounted. Because, like, let's be honest, some of the boys weren't particularly bright. And then I beat the score that I just got, and they were like, "Oh," but I didn't win the run, and I didn't like it. So you have to do like a 1.5 mile run as a fitness test, and I was like, well, I didn't beat everyone on the run, so now I need to get better at it. So I just started running around in circles on my parents' garden centre with my dogs. And it kind of gradually escalated to the point where next month I'm doing a 50-kilometer ultra marathon. So I've been running a lot, but then that's taken me the best part of 10 years to get to that point. So just to help people avoid the mistakes that I definitely made, you don't need to eat back the calories from your half-hour run. As the only time I think that you need to start looking at eating back the calories that you burnt is when you start going kind of over the 60-minute mark, and then probably you don't want to eat back all of them, you just want to eat back some. And also this idea of like eating back the calories after the exercise, it's like, no, eat additional before the exercise and fuel that exercise. But you can fuel going out for a jog really well on your habitual diet, as long as you're not avoiding carbohydrate. If you're one of those people that's like, no, low carbs, and you're probably going to have an awful time running if that's what you're going to try and do. So my advice would be to focus a proportion of the energy that you eat during the day before your run, and that will give you the energy to run, and then you can spend the rest of the day focusing on being in a calorie deficit, and you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about replenishing glycogen afterwards, which is like the carbohydrate stores in your muscles, because unless you're running for like 90 minutes plus, you're not going to deplete those stores of carbohydrates. So you have to do quite a bit of work to almost, like, I don't want to say to deserve extra food, but you have to do a lot of work to merit needing to eat more. Because when, say, you go out for a 20-minute run and you burn 200 calories doing that, you are probably going to compensate later on in the day by moving around 200 calories less. So it all tends to balance out. So if you're going to run for weight management, you do kind of need to be aware that you're probably going to compensate for that energy later on in the day. And it also might make you really hungry. So some people actually gain weight when they start running. So you sometimes see people who have appetite increases that go above and beyond the energy that they used during that run. So when I say that, I mean, you might burn 200 calories when you go running, but your appetite might increase by 350 calories. So you get excessively hungry. And then because you're excessively hungry, you end up eating more than you actually burnt in the first place, which then puts you into an energy surplus. So which is kind of, it defeats the object. So I do genuinely think don't use running for weight loss. I think if you're going to use exercise as a weight loss tool, keep it really, really low, low impact, low intensity, and go for a hike. It's way, way better. You can burn a lot more calories because you can do it for longer. Unless you're going to be going out for like a couple of hours run at a time, which, yeah, most people who are starting running aren't going to be doing that. I hope that answered the question. There's so much you can go into with running.
Same thing is why if I'm helping a client with my fitness pal, one of the first things I'll tell them to do is like disconnect it from Fitbit. Many different apps try to do it using sort of your heart rate, but it's like realistically, it depends how much energy you already have.
So you and I could probably go out for a run together, and I would probably burn dramatically fewer calories than you because I'm much better at running. I'm just assuming I'm better at running than you are. That I'm so much. I'm way more efficient at running, so I know how to do it without using as much energy. Whereas you would probably like waste more energy in inverted commas.
My running consists of a morning run, a big run. You know, my block's not small, but a big run around my block in the morning is a part of like my morning routine, and that's where the extent stops. I've gone and done many runs. I've done charity runs. I've done obstacle runs, which have always been fun. But yeah, it's for me. It's like I like it. But it's not my preference. I prefer cycling. Actually, I love going on my bike. That's my choice of cardio, I would say. But the same thing applies. You know, it's about energy efficiency, and no, I'm certainly not offended by that. That's probably why I run out of energy pretty quickly when I go to run. I'm like, I'm going
just
back
like things like technique and efficiency are things that will impact how many calories you burn. And also they use formulas to work that out. It's not like they're directly monitoring energy expenditure. They're basing it on probably this formula called like METs, which is metabolic equivalence, which is where they like take the intensity that you're working at, which they'll kind of gauge from your heart rate, and then and the speed that you're doing, and then they'll multiply it by like a factor. And it's all based on equations and formulas, so it's not 100% accurate, and you'll never manage to accurately monitor your energy expenditure unless you're literally sat in a lab in a special chamber all day, which kind of defeats the object because then you can't go for a run.
So one thing I also wanted to talk about, Charlotte, is a massive percentage of my audience is women, and an even bigger amount of the percentage of all the clients I've worked with, hundreds of them over the last few years, have majority been women. And one of the things that stood out about you is that you are
like an angry feminist.
So tell me a little bit about that and why that's so important to you, and more so in relation to what we're talking about today in the fitness industry.
I think feminism obviously goes back a long way. I think like it does go back a long way. Back to the point where we were supposedly burning our bras, although not that many women actually did that. But back to the point where women weren't getting paid as much. I think in the States there's still a massive pay gap, a gender pay gap. It's way better over here now. But even I know when I started in my kitchen job, I asked what my salary was going to be, and they're like, "Oh, this," and then paid me dramatically lower than that. And if I hadn't been a strong, independent woman who didn't need no man, I'd probably have just accepted that and gone, "Oh, well, it's because I'm inexperienced." So I was like, "Hang on, I'm running this fucking kitchen quite a lot of the time." I'm sorry, I just swore. Am I allowed to swear?
It's explicit. Don't worry about
it. I'm running this damn kitchen. So much, and you're paying me $6.50 an hour, which is minimum wage. I don't think so. And I basically got back paid up to like a wage that was suitable for my position, not just for my age and gender. And that was a really good paycheck month. And yeah, like I noticed it happening, and there's a lot of like, well, I grew up in very male-dominated environments, so like in sport, and even diving was quite male-dominated. And then in kitchens, I was frequently, I think both kitchens I worked in, I was the only female who worked there, or I was the only one who'd spent any length of time there.
Yeah.
And I noticed that a lot of the men in there just treated me like, so most of them, the younger generation of the males treated me like just like one of them. But then there was always a few of the older ones who would be like weird with
Yes.
me. And I remember we had one. I think he
Yeah.
was he Romanian or was he Czech? He was one of the two. He was like Eastern European. Um, and
Yeah.
we decided to tell him one day just to like mess with him a little bit because our sous chef left. And the sous chef is like the second chef in the kitchen. So just to kind of mess with him, because he was like, oh, well, obviously I'll be the next person in line to be sous chef. And the head chef was like, no, 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 Charlotte's going to be sous chef. And I was 20 at the time. So I was like this really small, I think I weighed like 50 kilos at the time. So I was like this tiny little girl. Um, and he went mental.
Yeah.
And I think that was the moment that I realized that I was a feminist. He went mental. He was like, she can't be the sous chef. She's a
Yes.
girl. And it wasn't anything to do with the fact that I was young, that I was probably less experienced than him. It was like, she's a girl. And he hammered in on that. And I didn't like that. And I was like, hang on, sit down. He didn't last very long after that. I think it's because there's so much of this thing of like women are just there to be pretty. And a lot of the time you'll see
Yeah.
I see it even in fitness advertising, like men doing really heavy squats and quite big physical feats. And then the women are there on the floor, like doing crunches or doing like weird bicycle toe tap thingies, like some obscure ab exercise or like a banded
Yeah.
glute something. Um, and it's like,
Yeah.
women can perform as well. And some
Yeah.
brands are getting way better at this. Like Nike and Adidas are very good at this, at like showing women actually doing sport. But a lot of like, I don't want to name brands that I don't particularly like for it, but a lot of the
Yeah.
other fitnessy brands have like lots of like pretty women doing pretty things, and it frustrates me. And then there's also this thing of in the fitness industry, women just kind of being abused and manipulated and not being given voices or being told that they're emotional or hormonal or psychopaths because they have opinions. And that, yeah, like it frustrates me. And there are certain experiences that I've had within this industry which make me realize that women need to be heard more and people need to believe women and people just need to stop treating women like shit, to be honest, and treating them like sex objects rather than like um rather than like human beings and like being people that are good at their jobs. So I did an Instagram post on it recently. It was like women just deserve to feel safe when they go to work, and not even like to feel safe. We deserve to be safe as well.
I'll have a lot of listeners now that'll be
Yeah,
jumping up and giving you a raise of applause. I think for me, it's like the irony of it is that feminism, it shouldn't even be a thing because it should
yeah,
just be equality all around anyway.
yeah.
So the fact that, do you get what I mean by that? It's like, but we do need it, and that's the sad reality. But it's also very good. It's very passionate. I for me, I'm just an avid supporter of it, and I think for me, it's like I woke up one morning and it was a couple of weeks ago, and it really stuck with me. And I was running an ad campaign on Facebook, and it was targeting. I had to, but listen, I had it targeting to men, I had it target to women as well. But it was, I think it did state on my page,
Mm.
that I do help women regain their confidence. That is what I do.
It's just what you
It's
do.
not
It's the
me
niche that you've
targeting
settled
them. That's
into.
just what I do. Listen, in our industry, it's usually because of particularly as a personal trainer, I
Mm-hmm.
help people for a living, or at least I like to think so. So it's not, I've worked in hospitality, and as you know, we've worked in kitchens, so we know how complaints are
Yeah,
in those kind of industries. But in the fitness industry, you don't tend to get much
yeah,
negativity or in the way of trolls because it's such a positive career, and you have such an impact. And I woke up one morning and I had a message. It was a comment, and it was basically saying, "You only work with women. Isn't that sexist? I don't think I'd trust a PT that only works with
yeah,
women." Now that stuck with me all day, and I'm thinking, you have no idea about me. Have no idea that I live at home with my beautiful wife, my teenage daughter,
yeah,
and even my cat is a female. Like, and you don't know that I was raised by a single mum. You have no idea that it's I didn't know where she was going with it, but it kind of, for me, it's like, no, I've just grown up to respect women. So I think that when I first started this, that's just who gravitated to me. So that just became who I worked with then for the next 4 to 5 years.
It's like
and
you working with performance athletes. It's like people could look at that and be like, oh, so you're fattest. It's like, no. I wrote a book for people that want to lose weight, but like I work one-to-one with performance athletes and people who are in high performance environments. And it doesn't make me like anti-fat people. It just makes me good at working with performance athletes. So that's what I choose to do.
Yeah, it's like you're not allowed to have a demographic or a niche or something that you specialize in. You need to work with everyone fairly. And it's like, whilst there is an agreement that everyone should be equal, there's also a sense of, well, yeah, but if you enjoy working with a certain certain demographic or a certain industry or people with certain goals, then I say to people that I'm not leaving anybody out, because I know that many other successful coaches that are fantastic. I could pass them on. So I'm not leaving anybody out.
We're not leaving you out. There are coaches around for literally everybody and every demographic. Like I know coaches that specialize in like LGBTQ plus training and nutrition, and it's not the fact that like nutrition and training for that demographic is any different, but it's just the fact that that person then understands that market more. And I'm just because I don't advertise the fact that I work with like the gay community, it doesn't, like, I'm not anti-gay. I don't understand the challenges as well as like this other coach. So if someone came to me and was like, oh, and I have all these like gender issues and stuff like that, I'd be like, oh, I know someone who'd be great to work with you, and I'd pass them on.
Yeah, absolutely. I could say the same about mental health as well. So, if I had someone who was really struggling with mental health, for me, I have specialised in that. So that would be, but that could be a sense with a lot of trainers are guilty of trying to work with everyone. They want to be the sort of jack of all trades, should we say. So they'll literally, I once was in a gym, walking on a gym floor in the early days, and I once had a lad ask a personal trainer, a guy asked a personal trainer, what is creatine? And the response was, it is a testosterone. And I couldn't believe what I just heard. But the fact of the matter is, this is someone who hasn't bothered to, research. This is someone who's just gone, I'm just going to train with everyone, and I'm just going to give random answers to everyone. And it's quite sad in that sense. So sometimes I don't think there's anything wrong with specializing in a certain niche. And as I say, for me, people who are listening to this podcast are going to be mainly women, and I'd love that. I love what you stand for, because I think it's fantastic. I respect my wife so much. She does rule my house, and I'm completely okay with that, because she could do a better job of it than me. Female clients that I will work with in one-to-one coaching, and I'll get them doing squats and deadlifts, and they're like, wow, I love this stuff. I never done this before. Well, it's like, because you were just conditioned to believe that you just needed to do crunches and
female exercises
and do squats and stuff. Yeah. You've had a very impressive career already, and you've not only just in your professional life, but also in your physical life, hobbies as well, and all the the competitions you've done, and you've done bodybuilding, you've done running, you've done if you've done like triathlon. Yeah, exactly.
You do, nothing comes easy, and people kind of look at where I am now and they're like, oh my god, like you're 25 and you're doing all this, like you obviously just got lucky, blah blah blah. And it's taken me 6 years in the nutrition industry to get to this point. So it's been a lot more than luck. There's been a lot of hard work. I was working, as I said earlier, like 60 plus hours a week in the kitchen to fund my degree, to fund saving for my master's degree so I could pay for that. Doing work events. I remember when I once worked 6 weekends in a row for this company, and ended up in hospital last year because I was just burnt out and like got a massive infection that I couldn't fight off because I was so run down. So it does take, don't push it that far, but it takes hard work, and you have to graft a little bit. Even the other day, I was sat on my laptop at 6:30 in the morning doing check-ins because I was like, I have so much to do. Then take all the opportunities you get. but don't be taken advantage of. So I know that I've definitely been taken advantage of because I was young and eager to learn and I wanted experience, like taking unpaid internships, for example, is that I had a master's degree and had to take an unpaid internship to get a foot in the door. And if I'd been in like had the extra couple of years of life experience that I had now, I'd have actually said like, no, I don't think that's fair. So take the opportunities you get. So I got the opportunity to work in professional football, so I took the opportunity, working with sports teams and things like that, and that was all done mostly for free or for just expenses. And you do sometimes have to do stuff like that to gain that experience. And then I suppose the third thing is know when to man up, but then also know when to take your foot off the gas and be okay with whatever decision you make in that situation. So I'll just liken this to like going out for a run. There's usually that point when you go out for a run where you're like, I could stop now. Like, I'm a bit tired. And it's making that decision in that moment as to whether you man up and keep going. Or maybe man up's the wrong word, like harden up. Like, I'm a feminist who's using like man up. Harden up. Something that my boyfriend once said to me while we were running is that I was like, James, everything hurts. And he was like injury hurts or like breathing hurts. And I was like, breathing hurts. And he was like, can you harden the fuck up for another 10 minutes? And I was like, fine. And then we kept going and ended up having another 10 minutes of really good run. But that was the turning point where I could have either hardened up or taken my foot off the gas. And either way, I would have had to have been okay with that decision. But I think it is making decisions and accepting the decision that you make. And knowing sometimes that maybe it wasn't the right decision, but it's a decision that you made at the time and it's fine. And you can always change things. So yeah, like work hard, but play hard as well. Take opportunities that come your way. Don't try and plan too far ahead because things will always come up and you can just deal with them. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. You can change your plans, but don't get so set in your plans that you can't change them. Then know when to harden up.
That for me means so much. It's like, don't plan ahead. Don't just plan to be like, things will get in the way. A pandemic might hit, which people may have thought was never going to happen, this time last year, but it has, and it's changed the world. And it's like, you always have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and accepting that things are going to change and not just, and it ties into what you said before. Don't just, when you hit a run, it's like, oh no, that's it. My heart's racing too much. I think I've had enough now. I just want to be comfortable.
A good level of uncomfortable, and you please stop. You might actually die level of uncomfortable, and learning to recognize the difference between those two.
Yeah. It's certainly not just, I just want to be uncomfortable all the time. That's probably not going to be the best idea. If you're needing an ambulance at the end of your run, you've probably pushed too far. So you've got the one book out, which I am going to plug in the information so other listeners can go and check that out. I do strongly recommend it.
So the first one was fat loss. The second one's going back towards my kind of bread and butter, which is performance nutrition. So it's probably going to be, I started trying to do it for just like all of performance nutrition. And then I realized that I don't think I can, I need to niche it down a little bit. So it's going to be endurance performance nutrition because that's kind of like my forte. It's the thing that I'm very good at. It's the kind of clients that I really enjoy working with. So I'm going to write a book on it so that it'll take a while. It's not going to be out like next week. It's going to take me a good few months. It took me about 6 to 9 months to write the first one. So I'm kind of assuming by like the middle of next year, I should have that out. But in the meantime, I'm also going to be working on some other stuff, some resources to help practitioners. And I also coach one-to-one as well. Like fat loss coaching, I tend to steer people towards the Fat Loss Handbook unless they have very specific needs that kind of can't be covered by the advice in there. That's kind of me. Is like writing books, writing resources, coaching people, trying to do good things in the industry.
We certainly need more of that in a very flooded industry with a lot of misinformation and a lot of terrible ethics, which winds me up. It makes my personal goal. There's always going to be times where I've thought, man, I'm in over my head. Like I could easily leave this career, but I never will because of stuff like that. I feel it's almost like a superhero mentality. Like, as long
would
as that
say.
misinformation's
That's why
out
I wrote
there,
the book.
I must carry on.
Cost is such a barrier to a lot of people, and then the like less good personal trainers, let's say, or nutritionists, tends to be the ones that charge a bit less. So people will go towards them and then be given some terrible advice. And I'm sure that a lot of the time, these personal trainers or coaches or nutritionists don't mean to be giving out terrible advice. Like, they think they're doing quite well. They just don't know that what they're telling people is actually wrong. And I've seen examples of it recently where people have asked me to look over their work, and I'm like, oh, you don't give this to clients, do you? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, oh, okay. You need to change this, and all of this. Just I'm going to highlight the bit that you need to change, and then just highlight the entire thing.
Yes, the entire
so a lot
page.
of the time, the coaches don't realise that what they're telling people is bullshit. So they think they're doing good things, and some of the things that they tell people might actually get them fat loss results, but not because of like the thing that they actually told them, like something that it causes them to do. Like, if they go, oh, you have to go keto, it just means that they accidentally cut out a load of calories, and then end up in an energy deficit, sort of by accident. And it's not because of the keto; it's because of the energy deficit. So yeah,
you've reinvented the wheel suddenly. There's 8.5 billion people in the world, and for some reason I've just managed to change my physiology to do something different that no one else can do.
Like the eat fat to burn fat thing, and you'll have heard of this being bandied around a lot. It's like, oh, I'm now a fat burning machine, and it's like, yeah, you're burning the fat that you are putting into your body because there's no carbohydrate to burn. We're going to burn cardboard and we're going to burn wood. Oh, but you haven't put any wood on there. Yeah, look, now it's exclusively burning cardboard. I invented this special fire that burns cardboard. It's like, no, but you didn't put any wood on it. Yes, but it's burning cardboard. It's yes, because it's burning what you gave it. Yeah, it infuriates me, in case you can't tell.
I've definitely calmed down a bit. Some of my people, some of the listeners that know me now will be chuckling, because I have calmed down quite a bit from going at certain diet companies, which I'm not going to say. I don't know if you've heard of it. Okay, go and have a look at it after this show. Basically, it's weight loss toothpaste. Don't ask me how it works. I didn't even bother to find out. But it's an actual product. So a client brought it to my attention. Okay, so loving the sass there, the banter. That's great. So one thing I'm going to ask now is, obviously, for people who've just listened to, everything you've just said, which is all fantastic, where can people find you? Like, if people want to know, like, I just want to know more about Charlotte now, where will they find you?
So I'm at charlotte.f.nutrition. I probably should come up with something catchier, but I'm not going to. Or you can have a look on my website. It's a very self-made website, so be nice to me about it. And that is www.cf-nutrition.co.uk, and that's where you can find out a little bit more about kind of the services that I offer, and it's also where you can get the Fat Loss Handbook if you are wanting a copy, and you can also sign up to one-to-one online coaching there as well.
Okay, well, it's been fantastic having you on the show, Charlotte. Thank you for coming on and having such a fantastic conversation. I was just mesmerised by a lot of it. I love nutrition. I looked at my timer then and thought, it's an hour, which is what I was making my show, and I'm thinking I could easily, especially when we got onto the slim pace, I could go on another hour, but I better not. Absolutely, we certainly have to come on the podcast again, and I do hope to speak to you again soon. I'm going to put in the links to your website, to your Instagram, and of course where to find the Fat Loss Handbook in the description of this episode, so people will hopefully go straight to you. And have the best day, Charlotte, and thank you for coming on. I hope to speak to you again soon.